Somewhere in the mountains of China, more than 1,000 years ago, a group of alchemists were working on a problem. Not a military problem. The opposite, actually. They were trying to solve death. They believed that the right combination of minerals, ground and heated and mixed in the right way, would produce an elixir of immortality. So they spent years grinding and burning and blending, following recipes handed down through generations, chasing a life that never ended. And one day, one of those batches, a particular blend of saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur, did something the recipe had absolutely not predicted. It exploded. The early records mention singed beards, burned down workshops, which tells you roughly everything about how that first meeting went. Nobody in that room was inventing a weapon. Nobody in that room wanted a weapon. They were monks and physicians looking for eternal life, and what they had actually found was the most efficient method of ending it that our species has ever discovered. They named the substance Huo Yao, fire medicine. A name that still carries the faint, slightly embarrassed memory of what it was supposed to be. So here's the question. How does a failed anti-death potion become the thing that decides who rules the world? And here's the part almost nobody tells you. The gun's most important victim was never a knight, or a castle, or an army. It was an idea. Start with what happened before anyone thought to point it at a person. For generations, this stuff wasn't a weapon at all. It was a party. Chinese festivals lit up with bursts of color and noise, smoke signals, religious ceremonies, entertainment. Ordinary people met this substance the way you meet fireworks on a summer night, as spectacle, as something beautiful. That's worth sitting with, because it means the first thing gunpowder ever did to a human being was make them look up and smile. The simple version of the chemistry: saltpeter releases oxygen extremely fast when it's heated. Oxygen is what fire eats. So you get a reaction that doesn't just burn, it burns so fast that it turns into a violent, sudden expansion of gas. That expanding gas is the entire secret. Every firework, every cannon, every firearm that has ever existed is just different answers to one question. What do you do with gas that badly wants to be somewhere else? Eventually, somebody in a military tent asked that question out loud. By the middle of the 900s, a thing called the Huochang the Fire Lance is already turning up in Chinese art. And the design is almost insultingly simple. Take a spear, strap a tube of bamboo to the end of it, pack the tube, light it in close combat. The result was a spear that breathed fire. The first time we can be certain one was used in anger is the Siege of Dayan. In 1132, Song defenders driving Jin soldiers back off their walls with jets of fire. And the accounts are clear that the terror mattered as much as the burns. Imagine spending your whole life learning the sword, and then meeting a man who can throw flame out of a stick. That's the moment. That's when it stops being a party. Now, if you'd stopped there, gunpowder would be a footnote, a frightening novelty, a flamethrower on a pole. What made it world-ending was one small idea, and it seems obvious now only because it already happened. Somebody started putting things inside the tube, bits of pottery, pellets, debris, and when they lit it, the fire came out, and so did everything else, hard and fast and forward. The weapon stopped being about burning you. It started being about reaching you. That's the whole firearm, right there in a bamboo pipe. Everything after this, every musket, every rifle, every gun you have ever seen is a refinement of that one thought. Bamboo, of course, is a terrible material to trap an explosion in. It splits. It bursts. It maims the person holding it. So craftsmen began casting tubes out of bronze instead, metal that could hold the pressure and survive it, and by the 1200s, metal-barreled hand cannons were in real use across China. Same principle. Vastly more force. Then the Mongols arrived. They came to conquer China, met these weapons at sieges like Kaifeng in 1232, and did something more dangerous than losing. They learned. And when the Mongol armies turned and rode west, they carried gunpowder with them across an entire continent. This is one of the great, underappreciated transfers in human history. Not a merchant, not a diplomat. An invasion, functioning as a delivery system, moving a Chinese invention across Eurasia in a couple of generations, faster than any trade caravan could have dreamed. Gunpowder didn't spread. It was carried by the people it had failed to stop. Now we arrive at the part this story is actually about. When gunpowder reached Europe in the late 1200s, it landed in a world that ran on a specific, unspoken belief. Not a law, a belief that some people were simply better than other people and that the proof was violence. Look at what a knight actually was. He was, first, a boy who began training with weapons before he could grow a beard. Years of it. Decades. And the body itself was reshaped by the work. This isn't a figure of speech. When they raised Henry VIII's warship, the Mary Rose, from the seabed, the archers on board could be picked out of the dead by their bones. Roughly 1 in 5 of the crew had a shoulder blade that never finished growing, because they had drawn a heavy bow since childhood and the bone was never allowed to close. That is what it cost to kill a man at a distance. Your skeleton had to agree to it. Second, he was ruinously expensive. Kitting out a young nobleman with the best available war gear could run to well over a year's wages for a professional soldier, and that's before the war horse, and the second horse, and the servants to keep both of them alive. And third, this is the important one, that time and that money were the justification. The nobility ruled because the nobility fought. Their right to your grain and your labor and your obedience rested on the claim that they were the ones who could protect you, because they were the ones who could kill. They had earned that with a lifetime and a fortune, and their sons would earn it again. The entire pyramid balanced on one point: killing well is hard, and only we can afford to learn it. Then, somebody handed a farmhand a tube. Here is the number that ended the Middle Ages. To make a longbowman, you needed a childhood. Years of drawing a bow so heavy that most modern archers cannot pull it at all. To make a knight, longer, plus a fortune. To teach a man to point an early gun in roughly the right direction and pull the trigger, you needed weeks. That's it. That's the whole revolution. Not the range, not the noise. The training time. And at close range, that shot did not care about any of it. Armorers used to test a breastplate by firing at it. That's where the phrase bulletproof comes from, and as guns got better, the tests got harder to pass. The armor that had taken a smith a year and a lord a fortune, the body that had taken 30 years to build, the bloodline that had taken 300, could be ended by a farmhand who'd been holding the thing a fortnight, and who very possibly had no idea who he'd just killed. Castle walls started coming down too. Tall, thin, elegant walls, built to stop ladders and arrows, were suddenly the worst possible shape to be, so engineers flattened them, angled them, sank them low and thick into the earth. The medieval castle, the silhouette that had defined Europe, quietly stopped making sense. But the castle was only stone. The real casualty was the argument. Because once anyone can kill anyone, the aristocracy has a problem it cannot solve with courage. It has lost the thing it was for. The knight didn't lose a battle. He lost his reason to exist. And it would take a few more centuries of pageantry and denial before that fully sank in. Here's the strange, uncomfortable truth underneath all of this. The gun is the most democratic object ever invented. It does not care how strong you are, how brave you are, how long you trained, or who your father was. It hands the same lethal authority to a duke and to a 15-year-old who has never won a fight in his life. That is the horror of it. And it is also precisely the point. Now let me show you the thing I've been keeping from you. While all of this was happening while bamboo became bronze, and bronze became the musket, gunpowder was quietly doing something else entirely. Because you don't have to trap the gas and shove a projectile out in front of it, you can also just let it push. Point the escaping gas backwards, and the tube itself goes forwards. Chinese engineers built those too. Fire arrows. Rockets, and unlike the fire lance, they never really died out. They persisted, drifted into Korea and India, resurfaced in European wars centuries later, and eventually, much, much later, became the earliest ancestors of the rockets that put human beings on the moon. So the story doesn't lead to the gun, it forks. The same accident, in the same room, in the same failed batch of immortality medicine, split into two paths. One path spent 800 years getting better at killing us. The other path left the planet. Both of them are the same discovery. Neither of them was intended. Those alchemists were reaching for a way to escape death, and what they actually put into the world was the most efficient way to deliver it and, eventually, the only way we have ever found to leave the Earth behind. I don't know what to do with that, but I think about it a lot. The rest, honestly, is engineering. Centuries of people solving the specific, annoying problem left behind by the person before them. The first guns needed one hand to hold and one hand to bring fire to the powder, which meant nobody was really aiming. So a mechanism was added that brought the fire down for you when you squeezed a lever. Suddenly, a soldier had both hands on the weapon and both eyes on the target. That's a trigger. That's the birth of aiming. But that mechanism needed a burning cord, always lit, which is a marvelous idea until it rains, or until it's dark and the enemy can see exactly where you are, because you are quietly glowing. So, sparks instead of flame. A device that struck a spark on demand, and later a better one, the flintlock faster, far more reliable in weather, and completely invisible in the dark. It became the standard across Europe for roughly 2 centuries. It's the gun of the colonial expansions. It's the gun of the American Revolution. Then someone attached a blade around the barrel in a way that let the gun still fire, and with that, the soldier who shoots and the soldier who stabs became the same person. Armies simplified. Formations dissolved and reformed. And this is the pattern of the whole thing. There is no genius. There is no eureka. There is a very long queue of people spread across a continent and 800 years, each one mildly irritated by the last version. So how did humans invent guns? We didn't really, not the way we invented the wheel or the plow or writing, where someone sat down and meant it. Nobody set out to build this. A group of people trying not to die burned their own beards off, and 8 centuries of tinkerers turned that accident into the object that would decide who owned the world. But of everything the gun destroyed, the armor, the walls, the empires, the vast and terrible number of people, the thing it broke first and most permanently was an idea. The idea that violence could be inherited, that some men were born to it and the rest of us were born beneath it. The gun didn't argue with that. It just made it untrue. And I'll leave you where we started, in a mountain workshop, in a room full of smoke, with a group of people coughing and blinking and staring at a scorched table, trying to work out what on earth just happened. They were looking for a way to live forever. In the strangest possible sense, through everything that came after, everything it built, and everything it burned, they may have found one. So here's my question for you. Was the gun the most democratic invention in human history, or the most destructive? I don't think you can have one without the other, but I'd like to know where you land. Tell me in the comments. And until next time, thanks for being someone who finds the real story worth paying attention to.